Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to my presentation today on reporting in project management. My name is Morgan Folsom. I'm a product manager over at Old Street Solutions for custom charts. And I really just want to talk about this today because I know reporting can be a really sore spot when we're talking about really anything, but project management specifically. In a past life, I was a Jira consultant for another solution partner. And this is a question that I got a lot. Trying to figure out how to manage reporting was such a headache. We spent so much time on it. So I figured I'd walk through just some of my thoughts about it today. Okay, so when we're talking about project management, there tends to be two camps, right? So we're going to see either one side where it is just let me do my projects. I don't care about reporting. I just want to get this done. Let me figure it out. Or there is the other side of the spectrum that is report on all the things, where you want to report for every single possible data point, every single possible thing that happens. You want a ton of data to drive your decisions. Both of these approaches can, in my experience, make your life more difficult. So what I found is that these are sort of the two extremes. Either you end up spending no time when you're like building your process and working on your project, you spend no time figuring out what you need to report on. And so by the time you get to, trying to answer questions for leadership, you don't have answers because you either don't have the data or nobody was looking at those things, things like that. Or on the other side, if you are the report on all the things kind of person, usually what you're going to see is that you may have a million reports, but very often we'll see things take longer to do because people are spending all this time filling out, required fields. They spend a lot of time effectively doing paperwork rather than their actual work, which is not what you want either, right? You don't want your reporting to negatively impact your actual project management, right? So one way makes leadership happy, right? Everyone's boss loves a report. But your individual contributors, you'll find that like you're filled with rage. And then the other side of it, you're going to see your developers, your individual contributors are going to be fine, but you won't have the answers to questions you need. So when we're talking about reporting, these are the four things I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to focus on these first two first. So really the question that you need to be asking when you're trying to figure out how to report in project management is what's important, right? And that's kind of a big question, obviously, right? If we had the quick answer to that, I wouldn't have a job probably, but trying to figure out what's important. These first two questions, I think, are the most important part of figuring out what's important. You guys get it, right? So is this actionable, right? What's the point of creating this report? Is it for something to happen based off of it? Do I want this to drive decisions? Can it help make those decisions? This is one of those things that I feel like seems kind of obvious, but there's a lot of reports that are built that are, if you've created a status report and send it to whatever, a PM or a PMO, nobody looks at it, but you spent an hour building the PowerPoint presentation or doing the slides to get the information ready, right? That's kind of a nightmare. So when we start talking about this, I like to start with who's your audience, right? Last year I gave the presentation here for MetaInf, and I talked about Jira reporting best practices. A lot of those things, we're talking reporting, so best practices are still relevant. But I found when I started putting together this presentation that the very first thing I was doing was answering the same question that I answered in that presentation, right? Reporting should be serving your teams, should be serving your projects. It should be moving you forward. Part of that means making sure what you're displaying is relevant, right? So let's look at this team dashboard. So this dashboard is using custom charts. We're seeing sprint data, issue type breakdowns, status categories, releases. That's all interesting stuff, right? Well, I mean, it's interesting to me, probably not interesting to anybody, but hopefully if you're here, it's interesting to you. But let's look at each of those individual reports a little more closely. So if we look at, starting here, story points per sprint, right? So that can be a useful metric to track. It's a velocity, right? So you can see how many story points were estimated for each sprint. Looking at this, can I take action based off of this? If I look at this, I see probably the first thing that I notice is the big difference between sprint 3 and sprint 4. That's good to know. It's good to know if some of our sprints, if our velocity is varying wildly, but why? What can I do with that, right? That's where your reports can start driving questions, driving actions. You know, I look at this report and I might say, what happened, right? Was the team overloaded on sprint 3? Did we lose a team member and we're slowing down? Are we seeing, maybe it was just vacation? That's good to know too. Are we not consistently estimating, right? Each of those questions can help us answer something that can help make our team better or make our projects more efficient, more productive, right? Because if the answer is, we had, one team member took 2 weeks of vacation, that's great. Does that mean that we don't have the capacity to stay on track? Does that mean we need to add more team members to the team to account for things like leave? Maybe we're just bad at estimating because we're a new team, in which case I would look at this and say, this will get better over time. That's what happens. That's how estimating works, and move on. But that's something that without seeing the velocity, I'm not going to have any idea if what I need to be asking, right? If we move down, we see that issue type table. So that's pretty straightforward, right? What could I find out from this, right? Like, I guess if I had a ton of bugs, I could see like, maybe we need to work on our testing process, or maybe we don't have the technical ability on the team to do what we're trying to do. Like, I guess I could figure that out from this. Otherwise, knowing how many stories versus tasks versus bugs and epics, I'm like, it's okay. So this is what I would maybe swap out for a different one, right? If I wanted to know what our bug rate was, instead, maybe I would want to look at something like how many bugs per fixed version or something, right? Like this, so I would probably scrap this issue type chart, right? It's pretty. I mean, they all are in custom charts, but it doesn't really, there's no action I can take on this. Looking at the status categories, this one's like, it's nice. You can see how many issues and story points are in the backlog versus what's being worked on. This can be a good, it could be an indicator of like WIP if you wanted to make sure that the team wasn't taking on too much right now. Right now we can see there's only 4 issues that are in progress. Depending on the size of our team, that's probably a good thing that we're not taking on too much at once. You can also see things like, obviously story points, we don't want to start doing too much, trying to math our estimates in our heads. But you can see, approximately like how if we have, for example, 13 issues in the backlog, only 22 story points tells me maybe not all of those are estimated. So we can see things like that from this. This one, it would depend what you're looking on, whether this is actually an actionable or useful chart for you, right? Then we have the release progress in the bottom right, which I think is my favorite on the dashboard, right? So that is totally actionable, right? This one is great. We can see how close we are to completing the work for any given version, right? So that's great. This could be effects version as well, but that way we could see, looks like we should maybe start getting ready to release 1.0 because we've only got maybe 1 ticket in progress and everything else has been completed, and we're nearing 1.1 as well. So that's definitely actionable, right? I could drive our release process hugely. So that's great. So if I'm looking at a team level, this dashboard, it's fine. I would, maybe change a few things around to make it a little more relevant, but it's not bad. So that's at a team level, right? Who would be looking at this? That's the first thing I'm going to ask myself. Maybe you're Scrum Master, maybe a project manager, PMO, those sorts of folks to try to, check in on the team. So that's good. If I am a member of this team coming to this dashboard, I'll ask the same question. If I'm a developer and this is my team and I come to this dashboard, is this actionable? Is there anything on here that can help me figure out what I need to do when I sign on today? And I think the answer is no, right? I could, no, I don't know which of these issues are what. I don't know what's relevant to me. So probably, is this actionable? Is going to be a different answer. An actionable dashboard for a developer may look more like this, right? So now I'm looking at my work dashboard. So this one, all of these gadgets that we're seeing here, they're all custom charts again. They're using the current user JQL. So this dashboard is called My Work. Anybody who opens this dashboard is going to see tickets that are assigned to them. So you can see these are all assigned to me, right? So the very first thing I have on this dashboard is blocked issues, right? If I have blocked issues, that's probably the first thing I want to see. So I can sign in, pull up my dashboard and say, what's stuck? What do I need help with? This is great if you're getting ready to head into a stand-up, right? I can see all of the things that I'm working on. I can see the things that are blocked. I can even see I've added like linked issues here. So I can see the priority, the linked issues, and this can help me take action or make decisions, right? The very first decision being, what do I need to work on, right? Having a list, this is often at an individual level, something like an issue list or filter results is going to be more useful than like a pretty chart, because I can see each individual ticket. That's more like what I'm probably looking for here. Ooh, go back. Otherwise, I can see my issue breakdown by epic. That could be, if I cared about what if epics were projects and I wanted to just keep track of a higher level, this could be useful. This also could not be, right? So it depends, I know the terrible consulting answer to everything, but whether this is useful, it depends. Then I've got my personal velocity, which is good for me to understand maybe if I care about that. Probably not something I would want a manager to be looking at, right? We want to avoid tracking velocity by person, but for me, if I want to see how am I doing tracking against sprints, that could be relevant information. So as an individual contributor, is this dashboard actionable? Can it help me make decisions? Yes. Could this one, the one we just looked at, is that actionable, help me make decisions? Not if I'm just working on the project, right? On the other hand, if I am a Scrum Master, this is probably not relevant, right? Your personal velocities, you're not going to be doing that. If issues aren't assigned to you directly, this entire dashboard would be, for the most part, empty. So trying to figure out who the audience is of your reporting is going to drive a lot of what you show. And I think a lot of times when we see people struggle with reporting, either overdoing it or underdoing it, it's that they haven't figured out your reports need to be tailored. If you try to make a dashboard for everybody, it's going to be probably useful for nobody, right? Being more specific is better in this case. I know it's a lot easier to just create one dashboard that everybody can look at, but it's just, right, like these are two different sets of data. And one of them is useful to me and the other is not, but that doesn't mean that the same pieces of information are useful to, different people on my team or part of the PMO. So that's the first thing I would look at. So is reporting important? Yes, but not all the same reporting is useful to all the same people. So next, how do you know what's important? We talked about it being actionable or helping make decisions about what needs to be done. The next thing is I think something that kind of gets overlooked is context needed to make this useful? This one can be tricky, especially on a Jira dashboard, right? It's not always the easiest thing to add context on a dashboard, right? So let's look at this, for example. It's a RAG chart. Everyone loves a good RAG chart. what we're seeing is just a pie chart that is red, amber, green, number of issues. Pretty straightforward. Looks nice, is something that you would show your boss or put in some slides and say, yep, things are going good. However, that's cool if everybody in the room, everybody you're talking to knows what red, amber, and green actually represent, right? When we're talking status reports, you know, you can do overall project status, budget status, it's like a resource and allocation status, all sorts of things. What does this actually represent? If I'm just looking at a gadget on a dashboard, I don't know. Which is a huge part of why, two things. It's a huge part of why I think a lot of reporting ends up being pushed to Confluence, because there's room to add that extra detail. But that's also why we have a description field in custom charts. I think this is like one of the most, probably not often very overlooked. I think it's really highly used because you know, most dashboard gadgets you can't actually add any text to, but this, now I can look at this and anybody reading this can see that this is actually really based on budget, right? This is a specific program status, but if I'm looking to see my timeline status, this isn't going to tell me anything about it, but it's better that I know that, right? And then I can pull together the reporting that may be relevant otherwise. So when we're looking at, is context needed to make this useful? Check out things like building your reports in Confluence, making sure there's space for commentary, right? I mean, you want your reports to be as self-explanatory as possible, but I mean, it's not a perfect world, so we don't always get what we want, and sometimes you need to add some extra detail. So having resources available in the same place the reports are makes them just like so much more useful, right? It can also help if there's something, or if there are insights that are perhaps not obvious based on the chart, or if you're handing this over to somebody who is less familiar with the process, rather than forcing like new required fields and descriptions and things on Jira issues, just add a little color here, and you don't have to have it, and you don't have to make it more difficult on the people actually working on the projects, you know? Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about is, as far as figuring out what's important to include in your reporting, is looking at, is your data good? I will use this example in every single presentation I give. I love talking about how terrible it is to report on labels. I know I'm going to hurt some feelings with that one. I know labels are a really powerful field, right? You can do anything with labels, which is, you know, kind of the problem, right? When we're talking about reporting, I mentioned at the beginning, there are people who go a little bit overboard. Usually what that ends up looking like is they'll create, you know, 50 required fields on every story, and every developer creating a ticket has to fill out all of these individual pieces of information, and they spend a lot of time doing that, and those are the people who hate Jira the most, right? That's just true. Otherwise, or on the other side, those people who don't really think about reporting when they're designing their whole how Jira works will often end up with this report that you see before me today, which is using labels for what is actually pretty important reporting. So we can see here kind of the big downfall of labels is that they're just an open text tag field, right? That means that they are subject to user error. So we can see things like typos, the difference in the Q2 deliverable with a dash versus an underscore. This is not something I would ever want to give to my boss if I was trying to report on anything, right? Because you'd see like your sales versus salsa, your dashes, your abbreviated versus long. It's just a mess. If your data looks like this, don't report on it, right? If this is where you are, where you don't have, or I guess really, what is a better thing to say is that if you find yourself with something like this, that is a good sign that you need to reevaluate the information that you're collecting and how you're going to be reporting. Because maybe the answer is that you need a deliverable field And that's fine. This obviously isn't on all issues. It's probably not going to be a required field or a quarter field or whatever. To make sure that your reports are actually good. I will say too, if you have a big dashboard that is, an executive level dashboard, and your data is bad, I mean, you can get kind of what I would say is embarrassing reports like this, but also you can just have incorrect insights. If somebody's looking at a dashboard and is trying to see, is this actionable? Can I make a decision based off of this? And the data is bad, they could be making the wrong decisions, right? That's a risk of having bad data, is that the people who look at your reports are looking for something and they'll find the wrong thing. Which is just a headache. I mean, it either makes you look really bad or really good, but regardless, it doesn't make you look how you're supposed to look, right? So knowing if your data is good is going to be important. And if it's not, something to fix, because again, you don't want to be making the wrong decisions. So just as a sort of a wrap up here, how do you know it's important? Make sure that the reports that you're putting together are actionable, that you can look at this and make decisions based off of it. And again, that's not going to be universal for everybody. Some people will look at a report and what's important to them is different than what's important to people in different roles. That's just how it is, and something that you want to account for. If context is needed, make sure you're providing it. Once you've answered those first two questions, the second two are going to be what helps you really refine your reports, right? So once you figure out the actionable information, the reports that are going to drive change and provide information, then you want to see, do they have enough information to be useful? Do I need to add context? Is the underlying data good? Or should I be excluding this because it's not going to actually, it's not actionable if the data is bad. So those are the four main things to hit. Which is to say, in summation, right? So how important is reporting in project management really? And the answer is, of course, it depends, but really it's just as important as you make it, right? What's actually important is that you are reporting on the correct things to the correct people. Figuring this out is not easy, obviously, or I wouldn't be having to give a presentation on this, right? And often involves a lot of trial and error. Sometimes what I'll do internally is I'll create a dashboard, maybe for myself, if I want to figure out how the support portal's doing, or how, if we're meeting our SLAs and our metrics. And then I'll maybe put a pie chart there and eventually end up just skipping to the same few gadgets every time. I'll just get rid of the ones I don't look at, right? Like, what's the point? You'll figure out what is, what's actually useful as you're making these decisions. If you're the one looking at the reports, if you're the one creating the reports, you want to be sure that you are providing folks information that, that is useful. So with all that being said, I want to thank everyone for your time. And I hope you all have tons of fun building your reports after this. I know, of course, everybody loves nothing more than reporting. Thanks again for your time and have a great rest of the conference. Bye, y'all.